Hello, good morning, everybody. Hope you are doing well. So, today we continue with lecture number 4, and we are going to discuss qualitative data analysis. So, we have learned, what is quantitative research method, what is qualitative research method, what is also mixed method. And learning the concepts of those methods also we need also to know how we are going to make use of the data collected, how we are going to analyze it in order to come out with a scientific and systematic knowledge and conclusions. So, data analysis, you as a researcher, you are more interested in the data, or to analyze the data to bring meaning to the vast narrative, to come to truly understanding what the data are saying from the perspective of the respondent or the informant. So if you remember, we have showed that in qualitative research method, we have the so-called cyclical process where data collection occurs simultaneously with data analysis. While you're collecting the data, you analyze the data. Then when you analyze the data, you discover other things that is not well understood, or some confusion, or you have to generalize something. Then you go back to the field and collect more data. So the analysis begins when the data collection begins, reading, intuiting, analyzing, synthesizing, and reporting on the data. So it's not that an easy task like quantitative, where you give to the software will give you, the test or the result of the test. But here it's about reading and reading and reading many times, thinking, trying to explain that data, analyze it, then report it. Sometimes we call it as a theoretical sampling because we collect data until saturation is reached. If you remember, also we discussed when we say about data collection, in quantitative we calculate sample size, right, based on the population. But in qualitative, we don't have that calculation of sample size, but we keep interviewing until we reach the level we call level of saturation, or where you find that there is no new information is gathered. When interviewing other people, they will give you similar or same answers. There is nothing is new. There you have to stop collecting this data. So, the data analysis for the qualitative research is about generalization. Generalization drawn from earlier interviews also. In order to make it firm, you must return it to the participant for clarification and elaboration. So you cannot just generalize, facts and finding. You must make sure that that generalization is really based on participant and informant experiences and belief. So you are going to look for meaning in the data as it is gathered. You have to be, objective. You should not be biased. Means that all this generalization, all this conclusion must be from the meaning of the respondent and informant themselves, how they give you this information and why they mean about it, but not based on your meaning or based on theoretical literature review meaning. So data similar in meanings are clustered together into preliminary categories and require an extensive amount of time, and this is we will see it in coming slides. You may ask that question or ask you that question. Have you just conducted a qualitative study involving interviews, focus group discussion, observations, document or artifact analysis, and journal notes or reflections? What I know, most of students, they may not really experience, data analysis for qualitative methods. But don't worry. So today we are going to learn, about data analysis for qualitative methods. What to do with all this data you gather from research. So it is just as there are numerous statistical tests for quantitative data analysis. Also, there are so many options and ways how researchers conduct qualitative data analysis. So, qualitative researchers have developed several different methods of data analysis, but today we are going to mostly discuss about two most prominent and famous method, which is an ethnographic data analysis and a grounded theory. So both approaches reflect the inductive strategy, typical of qualitative data analysis, and each of the methods shows that coding strategies facilitate, the identification of themes in the data. Here the key word is coding strategies, or how we code, and this is what is all about the qualitative data analysis. So we start with the first approach, which is an ethnographic data analysis. The ethnographer integrates data analysis into data collection, process while in the field, and this is also for the grounded theory. Means that when, as we say, you are collecting the data, you are analyzing, and this is to help the ethnographer, and to guide him or her, in order, sorry, to guide the participant, or participation and observation in the field. So we have four, a level of data analysis occur simultaneously. The first one is domain analysis. Domain analysis is a process of reviewing a field notes containing the inquirer's, summary of observation, interviews, document reviews, and inquirer thinking to discover the domain of meaning associated with the lives of people being studied, and specific details of those lives categorized with those domain, or we call them terms. So the focus, observation, subsequent visit to the field note, and or to the field of inquiry itself to expand the list of details, or includes terms associated with domains selected for further scrutiny. Then we go for taxonomic analysis. We refer to searching for ways, to include terms within selected domains. Also, selected observations are subsequent visit to the field note, and or to the field or inquiry to extend and verify the taxonomic analysis. Then we have the third one, componential analysis, is search for ways of distinguishing among the included terms in each selected domain, as a means of understanding why participants distinguish among the terms. Then at the end we come, from this 1, 2, and 3, we come to the theme analysis, where we develop themes and categories that refer to the analysis. So I start with the first one, which is the domain analysis. As a researcher, moving, from observing social situation or set of behavior carried out by people in a social situation. Here, why? To discover the cultural sense, as we say. Ethnographic analysis is about studying the culture of groups of people. So a cultural domain, or we call it, or categories of meaning that include smaller categories, where you strive to identify the semantic relationship in observation made. For example, is X is kind of Y? Is it X is the result of Y? Is it X a part of Y? So these are the questions that you need to understand, and bring an answer to it. Uh, uh, so In domain analysis, the first step requires you as a researcher to identify the primary domains with anchor in the interviewee's discourse or the participant discourse. The challenge here for you is to ensure that the domains that are defined do really reflect the consent of the interviewees as indicated in the narrative rather than merely reflecting your own predefined set of categories. Because if you interfere, then your analysis will be biased because actually a respondent or informant did not mean it, but you thought of it. So you make sure that the domains that generated is reflecting exactly what informant are intend to say. So, of course, ultimately, the domains are defined by the researcher also, and therefore they do represent an imposition by the researcher of his or her way of classifying topics into narrative data. But furthermore, there may be several different and equally valid ways that information can be categorized. So, nevertheless, there are simple strategies to double checking the importance of interviewees of the primary domain identified. First, for example, in the context of of any social research, we assume, for example, in public health, you as a researcher may be concerned primarily with practical matters, and those the categories can be defined in terms of concrete issues raised by interviewees there rather than linguistic content and so forth, which may be of concern of social scientists. So thus, the orientation of the domain is already determined. So in order to identify these issues, you as a researcher, you need to familiarize yourself with the data, read the data and read and read, understand it. The text should be, read through several times. Then each interview can be indexed, recorded, and record the topics of discussion line by line, and then the indexing of topics which can then be collated across all interviews permit the identification of the preliminary list of issues. Some of these will recur more frequently than others, and some can be defined as subtopics or broader categories. So thus, by grouping them all together, a final list of just a few fairly broad domains can be made. And here you will come to the first step where you identify all your domains. Then you go to the second, which is taxonomic analysis, which is a more in-depth analysis in which a researcher is searching for a larger categories to which the domain may belongs. And they define a domain. For example, lack of food. Another domain is I don't have clothes. Another domain is I am sick or I cannot go to a hospital. So what is the larger category that may these domains belongs to? We can say living in poverty. So category or poverty as a category, is containing those three domains, which is lack of food, lack of health, and a lack of clothes. So a taxonomy is a set of categories organized on the basis of a single semantic relationship. Major difference, the taxonomy shows more of the relationship among things inside cultural domain. So what is the relationship between not having food with lack of health care or health condition and lack of clothes? So this is in the taxonomy analysis where you're going to discuss. So in taxonomy analysis, you are constructing a taxonomy of subcategories. Once the primary domain are established, the topics can be defined as a secondary subset of them, rather than simply relying on the preliminary topics identified through the indexing system or what we call the domain, at this stage it is useful to start arranging the actual text into primary domains. This strategy groups actual phrases together and allow the identification of subcategories to emerge directly from the interviewees own words, and thus is more likely to represent those topics more important to the interviewees. So then we come to the third one, which is componential analysis, where it looks for contrast among the cultural categories in the domain. So systematic search for attributes, so component of culture associated with cultural categories based on Spreadley, I think 1976 or 79. He uses the idea of mail to explain this compositional analysis. In our culture, we can classify our mail into junk mail like flyers, notes, etc. Or also we have bills, magazines, personal letters. Each cluster has an attribute that conveys meaning for us, so not visible to maybe someone else from another culture. For the component analysis, it's allow you to finally get the grips with what you have really been looking for throughout all this journey. That's what we call what those interviewed actually say about various subcategories or thematic of topics that have been identified in the first two stages, which is the domain analysis and taxonomic analysis. This is the crucial part of the content for defining where problems or successes lie in a particular subject, and the study, for example, in public health. By collating all phrases or word narrative on various subcategories in the second step, the book of the work for this stage has already been done. So all that remains is to summarize the content into key issues for planners or policymakers to address. In a written report, the results from this step are typically presented as a direct quotation from the interviewees. Then we come to the last, type of analysis, which is team analysis for the first ethnographic analysis. So after you don't you develop all those categories or subcategories, now those culture themes are recurrent, patterns in the data that are used to connect domains. So themes are assertions that apply to numerous situations and have high degree of generalizability. Sporadically suggest a number of universal themes such as social conflict, cultural contradictions, informal techniques of social control, managing impersonal social relations, acquiring and maintaining, status, solving problems, etc. Also, based on this thematic analysis, which is the last stage, in this approach, is to identify the relationship between subcategories. What are now the relationship between the subcategories that you identify in the previous, what we call it, componential analysis? If this is appropriate, within the research question of your research, and more importantly, between the primary domains that you identify in the first one in domain analysis. In this way, you as a researcher, you try to build up an overall picture within the collection of actual quotation made by interviews. You as a researcher, you will be, or you need to seek statements that relate each subcategory to another either in terms of influence or priority. So after that, you come out to a whole develop of a team or teams that represent or explain that cultural phenomenon. So now we go to the second approach, which is a constant comparison method. Constant comparative method involves actually breaking down the data into discrete incident or units and coding them to categories. So during the data collection process, grounded theories generate theory using the constant comparative method. For example, each piece of information is coded and compared to other pieces for similarity and differences. We have three steps, to conduct constant comparative methods. We have concept formation, concept development, and concept modification and integration. In concept formation, the first thing is about coding. You see, coding occurs at three levels. The first level of coding, also called substantive code, means that you study the data line by line, looking for key process, and you codify the substance of each data. So here you will have substantive code use participant words, and you will have hundreds maybe of codes. So in the second level, you condense level 1 code to assign categories of codes. For example, from 100 codes, you may shrink them to only 70 or 50. So categories are usually mutually exclusive. Then what in the third level is you identify the core variables or the basic social psychological process, or we call it BSP. Core variable is one that focuses on the theory and accounts for most of the variation in patterns of behavior that is both relevant and problematic for the participant involved. So usually represent the type given to the team that emerge from the data, and they are the process that occur over time and that involve changes over time. So in the concept formation, it's usually about study the data line by line, bring in all the codes and identify the codes in three levels. First as a general, then you shrink them to a lesser, then you come out with what we call them basic social psychological process. Then after we finish, we found this basic social or psychological process. We come to the second type of constant comparison method, or second step, which is concept development. Here we are going to develop the concept. Three steps involved. First, reduction. We compare each category of codes that we identify, or in previous step, to see if there is an umbrella category and the which several existing categories can be merged, which is similar to what we have done in the first method, ethnographic analysis. So here you get all those codes that you identify and develop previously and try to put them under one umbrella. Those codes that they have similar meaning or similar perspective, or addressing similar topics can be put under one umbrella. So you identify theoretical linkage among categories and collapse them to a more general categories. Then after, when you have these subcategories, you may also find a general umbrella or general category that can contain those categories or subcategories, and you should study them or identify what is the theoretical linkage between them. So second, the selective sampling of the literature. not only from the informant, or you could develop those categories, but sometimes also you have to look at the literature. Remember, literature is not to drive you to how to do your research, but in that case, the literature is for you to learn more about emerging concept. Literature here is considered also as data and used to fill in the gap in emerging theories. Sometimes when you rely only on informant or participant, ways or description, you may still have some gaps. Some categories are not emerged. So you use literature as data. So you may add clarity to the theoretical description. You don't use a theoretical literature as a theory driven, or as to drive you to the do the research. Then the third one, selective sampling of data. Here, done once the main concept have emerged. Once you have informant description and literature, and develop categories, and now you do that selective sampling of the data. So you collect additional data in selective manners, for example, to develop the hypothesis statement and to identify the properties of the main variables, and to ensure saturation of categories. Means that there is no more categories will emerge. That is the saturation. So here, you as a researcher, you stop collecting new data when satisfied that they are not hearing anything new about the category or hypothesis. At this stage, the core category variables emerge. Then we go to the last one, which is concept modification and integration. And we have two processes, theoretical coding and memoing. In the theoretical coding, where it is done to form a theoretical linkage between categories, and based on Bradley is 18 families of theoretical codes. We have three examples. The first one, consequence family. It have 6 CS: causes, context, contingencies, consequences, covariances, and conditions. And based on interactive family, we have mutual effect, reciprocity, mutual trajectory, mutual independence, interaction of effect, and covariance. And the last, third one, we have the strategy family, where strategies, tactic, mechanism, manipulations, maneuvering, dealing with handling techniques, ploy, and means and goals. So in the theoretical memory, these are the researchers' ideas about code and categories and the relationship among them. So we have three rules, as a researcher: to raise the data to a conceptual level, to develop the properties of each category, and to generate hypotheses about relationship among categories. So this is the second method. So we have discussed how we analyze data based on the ethnographic concept, and based on the grounded theory concept. Now let's take an example, but in this example we thought maybe it is more suitable for the second grounded theory concept. In this session is designed to provide a step-by-step guide for beginning qualitative research. You as a beginner, you want to know how to apply the appropriate strategies for data analysis, interpretation, and reporting. So it is like cleaning, a closet. You think of managing your qualitative analysis process like cleaning your closet. The same basic step apply here. So, for example, what are the steps of doing that? First, you may take everything out of the closet, then sort everything out, or save or toss. Those are important, you keep them. Those are not important, you just throw them away. Look at what you have left and organize into subcategories, how we call it chunking. Organize subgroups into clusters of similar things that belongs together, or we call cluster. Then the fifth one, as you put things back, how would you group them to maximize functionality? How do the groups make it work together? Or here we call interpretation and representation, or presentation, sorry. So there are four basic steps. All qualitative data analysis involve the same four essential steps. First, raw data management or data cleaning. When you gather in the field a huge amount of data, not all of the data you're going to use. Some of the data is really cannot be used. So we have to clean our data and we have to manage it. Second, data reduction. And here where we come about chunking and coding. So we have two types of reduction, 1 and 2. Then data interpretation and coding and clustering, how we interpret these coding and clusters. And the last, data representation, telling the story, or we make sense of the data to others. So again, before I start, we have this data analysis spiral one, which how you start from generate raw data, then you organize your data, then you read and read and read 3, 4, 5 times and make notes. Now, after you make notes, you identify themes, cores, categories, attributes, and behaviors. Then you develop your teams, then interpret the data. Then if you feel that it is not really understood well how to explain that phenomenon, then again read and read and read, or maybe you go again, generate the data again, organize the data, then read and read, and you continue. Or the second one, we start here the procedures, for example, we start from here. So data collection could be in text or image, and then we manage the data, an example, as a files unit or organizing. And then after we manage the data, we read and read and read, and here reflecting, writing notes, line by line, and getting the codes. Then after that, we describe, classify, and interpret context. We develop categories, and we compare between them. Then representing, visualizing where matrix trees, propositions will occur. Then we come to the account or the image of the theory, or explaining or telling the story. So let's go in the first step. As we say, we have 4 steps. Data management. So what is raw data management? Is the process of preparing and organizing raw data into meaningful units of analysis. For example, text or audio data transformed into scripts. Then image data transformed into videos, photos, charts. So as you review your data, you find that some of these not usable and or relevant to your study, and therefore you throw it away. An example here, you have this here, and you can see this is a bolded one. I can't think of particular example right now. You don't use it, right? Now the question, are some portion of the script unusable for or irrelevant? They are in purple color, suppose. Sorry, here it become black. So then after you manage your data and clean everything, we come to the step number 2, which is data reduction 1. So get a sense of the data, holistic, read this several times, read and read and read. Then you classify and categorize repeatedly, allowing for a deeper immersion. Again, write notes in the margin or memoing. You have the script, you use the margin there where you write notes or a code. Preliminary classification schemes emerge categorize raw data into grouping or chunking. Then we go to winnowing, where you develop an initial sense of usable data and the general categories will create. So preliminary set of codes developed and you cluster raw data into units that share similar meaning or qualities, then create initial code list or a master code books. And then we will see this in example. For example, that in example just now we remove here and the last one I don't have an example right now. I cannot think of an example right now. So it's already clear. Now you can see I put the colors here so to make it easy for us to understand. This script we can or transcript, we can cluster or chunks and cluster, the meaning of that description in three. We have, you may think, which section of data are broadly similar. For example, he said, I always wanted to get my doctorate, but I never felt I had the time. Then I reached a point in my career where I saw that without credentials, I would never advance in the type of position I aspired to. But I doubted I could do the work. I wasn't sure I could go back to school after so much times. And did I have the time with working and family? These were the things I struggled with as I looked, for the right program. Finally, starting the program with others like me, it felt, surreal once you switch gears from being an established administrator to a college being a student or doctorate student. You realize you lose control over your life. You are not in charge in that classroom like you are in your office. But also, once you say you are a doc student, people look at you differently, and people at work begin to take me more seriously, as for my opinion, as if I now possess, a special knowledge because I was going for a doctorate. It was the same information as I had shared previously, but somehow it had a special quality. Is that like magic? So by reading this, you can see, if you see the red, it's more about, he's talking about credential. If you see the blue, he's talking about, personal struggle, how he struggled, to manage between work and family and doing a PhD. And the green, which is shifting in identity. Before people, they see him as just normal administrative staff. But once people knows that he's doing a doctorate, then they start taking him seriously and asking for his opinion. Actually, he said that the opinion when I give them is same knowledge that I give before, but people now look at it differently. So you can see here from that how we chunk and cluster this piece of script or piece of data. So now which chunks can be clustered together to relate to a board coding scheme? This is it will be your question now. Now I give another example here. For example, this is why we talk about coding. For example, page for simple interview script or transcript, and you can see use the margin here the code here, and the themes are here, and he highlight each keywords that gives a meaning and write on the margin. For example, in the code here, this all, for example, here from the first line until here, he close, knit community. He call it about close knit community. Then the second, he talk about the health of community or community values. Then that one here, he talk about changes. Is threatening here. Changes is threatening. He's describing. Then the last, he talk about visionary skills of talented people. And in the team, he talk about in the right one potential teams here, for example, the community, because talking about here community, then second, the potential team here, they talk about leaders or leadership, and the last one, they talk about ideas, return to a description of community again, or talking about the vision. So in that way, I remember you have a huge amount of scripts like that. But you may say that will take for you a long time, right? But yes, there are some softwares that help you, to manage your data, but not to, identify or develop your teams. We will talk about those software later. So this is another method how you do it. Then the second step is data reduction. Now we have identified so many codes and subcategories. How we are going to deduct them to make sense, of the data in a more systematic way. So the process of reducing data from chunks into cluster and codes to make meaning of that data. Chunks of data that are similar, begin to lead to initial clusters and encoding. Clusters assigning chunks of similarly labeled data into cluster and assigning preliminary codes, and codes refining or developing codes books, labeling codes, creating a code through 2 or 3 cycles. Let's see here in the coding process. Initial coding also, for example, may include as many as 30 categories. So you reduce the code once, probably twice, and make them only 15. Reduce again and refine to code, that are mutually exclusive and include all raw data that was undefined, usually. So from 30, you bring them maybe to 20, then from 20, you may bring them to 15 or 10. So a priori or in vivo codes. A priori means code derives from literature theoretical frame. If you remember previously also we discussed sometimes, you need to go and check literature, not to drive you to the teams, but is to help you identify the gaps that you may not find it or may not emerge from the respondent or informant. So in vivo or inductive or grounded, those code derive from the data by using code names drawn from the participant code or interpretation of the data. It's like magic. It's a phrase that could, form the basis for a code category. So you remember you have two, a priori and an in vivo. So coding levels now in a descriptive to interpretative, to a pattern coding, you move from summary to meaning to explanation, or an open to an exile to a selective coding. Here, you move from initial theory to developing relationship between codes and imaging theory, or a first cycle to second cycle coding, where you move from describing the data units to inferring the meaning. So let's give an example, the same example like before, chunking, clusters, and coding. Now, if you remember, when we did, chunking the code, when we say read for credential, what are the codes that can emerge from that? So we have, career goals. He talked about, I wanted to get my doctorates about career. Then I reached a point in my career where I saw that without a credential. Second one, we say first read for credential. We have code for include career goals. Then second, career advancement. So he say here, I would never advance. Say advancement to the type of position, so career advancement. So this credential here, it has two. It has a career goal and a career advancement. And then the blue one, we say it's the personal struggle. He said that I doubt, that I could do the work, about doubt. So the first one is self-doubt. Then talk about the time. He said that I wasn't sure I could go back to school after so much time, and I did And did I have the time? So it's about time management. And the third one is about, we say, about shift in identity. So the first code could be, student rules. He say, once you switch gears from being established administrator to a college, being a doc student, you realize you lose control over time. And then second, identity at work, where he say, like you are in the office, but also once you say you are a student, people look at you differently. So identity to at work, or shift in identity, then shift in control, and lose a control here. So you can see from this, chunking to coding, we first say credential, we have two codings, then we say personal struggle, we have two codes, then we have shift in identity, we have another three codes. So now revising, or coding levels. When you decide about your code, now you describe the interpretive to pattern coding. That one we already done. Sorry. Here the coding progression. So descriptive or interpretive and the patterns. If you remember, in just now we had this credential. We have two. Career goal and career advancement, right? So need for a career advancement and goals. So what are the patterns here? CR, need for a doctorate to advance professionally and to meet a personal goal for advancement. And in the personal, we have self-doubt or personal self-doubt, we have personal growth, and we have personal work-life balance. Then here in the pattern, personal struggle evolves to address self-doubt about abilities, trying to achieve things before time runs out, balancing responsibilities with family self-work. So you can see this sentence explain all these three categories. And the last, identity, we have identity shifting, and we have student role, or identity student role, and I have identity shift in control, or IS, identity shifting. So managing the shift from student to graduate, from candidate to doctor, from non-expert to expert in the work setting, from losing control to regaining control at home and at work. So you can see this is how it links that three. Each here pattern, it shows the linkage between the codes that you develop here. Then we go to the third step, data interpretation and teams. So chunks or related data that have similar meaning are coded in several cycles. So once coded, those chunks become clustered in similar team or categories. So we create meaning of those clusters with labels. Team emerge from those clusters and interpret teams to answer the research questions. And so here an example, again the same example. How do you compile the cluster into emerging teams? Red for credential, blue from personal struggle, and green from shift in identity. So you begin to see the teams emerge, getting the degree, becoming a new person, and a personal achievement. Those are the teams that emerge. So now I will give you another example from a picture rather than from script. So look at this picture. Example of qualitative data by Olivia Archer, photos, for save the children. This guy and other group of his fellows, he say, this photo of me learning with other children on the street, I want to share this photo because we do not go to real school. We do not have real uniform or school books. So the question, how would you call the frictious qualitative data in this figure? So one appropriate phrase to describe or summarize the text segment of this picture and accompanying photo could be, for example, tall, uniform. Just you may have another chance, but let's make this or make use of this picture to create code and themes. For example, how would you code, the qualitative data in a figure? To help speed up your coding, you can, after having read through all your data, develop a coding framework which consists of the list of codes that you anticipate, will be also used to index and drive your material into descriptive topics. So if you are approaching your data following the deductive framework approach, your coding will be guided by a fixed framework because theory will guide you and you index your material according to those predefined codes. But however, you are following a more inductive thematic network approach where you don't have a theory to drive you. So you are likely to add a new course to your list as you progress with your coding continuity, developing your coding framework. Let's see now. Once you have, coded all your materials, you need to start abstracting the theme from the course and from an example of the picture we can see later. So you go through your codes and groups them together, to present common salient and significant themes. A useful way of coding this to write your code headings on a small piece of paper and spread them on the table. This is what we call the process. Will give you an overview of the various code and will also allow you, to move them around and cluster them together into teams. This we call a table method. So look for underlying patterns and structure, including differences between type of respondent. For example, adult versus children, men versus women, if analyzed together. Label this cluster of codes and perhaps even a single codes with a more interpretive and basic theme. So we call it them subcategories. Take a new piece of paper, write the basic themes label and place it next to your cluster of codes. If, for example, the code tone uniform and non-school books appear in your interview transcript with the working street children, as we see in figure 2, they can be clustered together as working street children like school of materials. So this is, for example, an example for that. He say we don't go to school, we don't have uniform and we don't have school books. So these two codes you can put them is on one basic theme: working street children, lack of school materials. So you can see this picture here they don't have schools, they don't have books, and also they don't have uniform. So this will be the course that we generate, and you can see the link between the course and the teams, and even maybe between the course themselves. Then let's go from course to basic themes. So you may find that not all of your code are of interest and relevance of your research question, and that you choose the only cluster, let's say, for an example, 60 of your codes into basic theme that help shed light on your questions. Let us say that for arrangement sake, through this process, you identify only basic, 60 basic theme rather than 60. Repeat this process with your basic theme. Examine your basic theme and cluster them together into a higher order and more interpretive organizing theme. And let's say, again, for argument's sake, that this process you use your 20 basic theme to only for organizing theme. So two of which represent struggle faced by working street children as examined by picture 3, and two which give details in their coping strategies, how they cope. So in figure 3, that we see later, also will illustrate how you can transparently show how you went from having descriptive code to focusing on new distinct interpretive and network theme that you can use to begin answering part of your essay question. And you can see here, first we just say struggle of working street children, and we give two here. They don't have books, and also they don't have uniform. But now you can generate so many codes. So you can see lack of uniform, no schools. That is the first. But also why they don't go to schools? Because they cannot afford to pay the fees. School levies. They are worried, and minds are elsewhere because they study on the street and tired, and they got also maybe a headache. So these two, lack of uniform and no school books, working street children, lack of school materials, lack of school fees and school levies, working street children unable to pay school fees. Basic themes. Then worry and mindset always elsewhere. Working street children worry about their dependent. And the last, tired in school and headache, working street children are exhausted. So from that four basic teams, also we can organize them only to another two teams only. So working street children, lack of school materials, and working street children unable to pay fees, we put them in one team, which is working street children cannot afford to go to school. And the other two, working street children worry about the dependent and working street children are exhausted, can be put together in only one team, which is working street children are stressed. Then from these two teams, we come out to a global team, and this is the title, or the conclusion, the struggles of working street children. So how they struggle from here lead you to all this. So this is a complete understanding. You see, from one picture added by other interviews or transcripts, or you can bring, a meaningful explanation of the concept. So you must know that the method of cutting out codes and moving them around on table is often referred to a table method, as I explained. The table method works particularly well for smaller studies. But remember, sometimes if you have a vast amount of data, example, more than 20 interview transcripts, you may find it helpful to use qualitative data analysis software such as NVivo or Atlas TI. But however, this software, they will not analyze your data, but they will manage your data and help you to easily identify the themes and categories and the codes. So these forward packages are, however, not free, and you will require license, but sometimes you may try a trial version, or may you ask your institutions to provide this type of softwares. Before we finish, also I give you some another examples here. This is a data extract containing unit of data and line by line coding. So data extract or carrier unit of data in NVivo code highlighted means from this in Vivo code means that from the respondent experiencing. So you see that is what he said. The doctor said there was nothing more he could do for her. I said to him, can't you give her dialysis? And he said, no, because it would kill her. I suppose it's too late in the day. I don't know. That's the reason he gave me. It would kill her. So I don't really know, but I thought, well, why? Why wait until till there is only 20% function left before you tell me in the first place? So shouldn't he or the doctor have told me when she could have had dialysis? Shouldn't someone then have said to me, well, look, she can have dialysis before it got to the stage where she suddenly has 20% of function and she can have it? Couldn't some have mentioned it earlier? You know what I'm trying to say. So this is the script. Now you want to come and do it line by line. For example, early descriptive, codes line by line coding. So nothing more they can do, wanting, analysis. The second one, treatment would kill. Another one, too late to treat. Another one, treatment will kill also, not being told early about. Another one, kidney function also is not reduced. Another one, not being involved in treatment, decision, confusion, mistreatment, and opportunity. So those are the code that you have. So from that early code, you may have a broad initial team. So we say he wanting dialysis, those the code, not benefit from the treatment, not involved in a treatment decision, poor understanding of the disease management, confusion about treatment, not sure about which treatment option to take, requiring further knowledge, inadequate communication. So this could put them in one team, the less informed decision. That guy, he was not informed about the decision. Or that one also development of initial teams and overarching concept. We have categories development. Nature of dialysis, difficulties in getting to hospital, for example, previous experience of dialysis, age as a reason not to start dialysis, uncertainty about the treatment option, not involved in treatment decision. This one that we studied just now. Poor understanding of disease management, confusion about the treatment. So those are the categories that you develop. So you may have final two teams. This the first, nature of dialysis, difficulties in getting hospital, previous experience, and age could be under informed and autonomous decision. And here, about uncertainty about the treatment, not involved in treatment decision, poor understanding of the disease management, and confusion about treatment, we can put them less informed decision. From these two teams, we can come to the concept, which is the patient decision. So you can see those are the tables that you need to use for you, or diagrams in order to develop the teams and general teams. Then the last step is data representation. Now, after we develop all our teams, we have to interpret our data. Interpretation of data or analysis of the qualitative data, simultaneously occurs with data collection and interpretation and analysis, right? Researchers interpret the data as they read and reread the data. Categories and code the data and inductively develop a thematic analysis as we shown. Theme becomes the story or the narrative. Now you have to tell the story. After you have done all these, you come to the general theme. Then how you are going to tell your story. But before we go that, how to evaluate your qualitative research? Developing a standard of quality first. Lincoln and Kuba's classic work shed light on how to assess the truth in qualitative report. They offered 4 alternative tests of qualitative and that reflect the assumption of the qualitative paradigm or paradigms. Credibility at first, dependability, transferability, and confirmability. Let's start with the first one. So credibility refers to accuracy of the data gathered. Description must be plausible and recognized by participants and enhanced by a prolonged time in the field, repeatedly observing and interacting with participants. That gives you a valid or credibility to your data. Using different data sources, method, data types. If you just rely on only interviews, you may have question on your credibility. But if you use focus group discussion, interviews, observations, all of them, then that makes data more credible. Conducting members check involving other investigators in the study, because only you may have that biasness, as we say, you may interfere, but involve others investigators with you in the field, that make credibility of the data. Then we go to the second, dependability, which is referred to stability and trackability of the chances in the data over time and conditions. I want to determine the extent to which another researcher with similar training and rapport with participant would make the same observation. This determined by an audit trial involving auditing research process, documenting all the raw data generated, and assessing method of data analysis. So it means that if we give that scripts and data you gathered from the field and give it to another similar researcher who is trained similarly as yours, could he find similar finding like you or different? If the findings are similar, then we say that you have dependability or stability. Transferability refers to the generalizability of the study finding to other setting, population, and context. Rapport must provide sufficient details so that readers can assess this. Lack of transferability is viewed as a weakness of qualitative method. So after you get a conclusion, is that can be generalized to different people, different setting, different contexts, different places. Then the last, confirmability, refers to the objectivity of the data. This is very important. Would another researcher agree about the meaning imagined from the data, the code that you develop, the categories you develop? An audit trial also is used to which the researcher explicates how personal biases may have some into play. Because you as a researcher, you may have some biases. You may interfere in interpreting respondent and informant, experiences. So if we give that data to another researcher, should he agree or disagree with your teams and course that you develop or not? So data representation types, as I say, now talking about the story, how storytelling and narrative, books, chronological, flashback, critical incidents, theater, a thematic or visual representation of figures, tables, and charts. So this all you can use them or you describe your data. So what are the qualitative data analysis type? We have most common type of data analysis approach, domain or content as well, and thematic, grounded theory or concept comparative, ethnographic, cultural, that we have just now explained. We explain about the domain, the content, the thematic, grounded theory, concept comparative, on ethnographic, cultural, right? Also, we have metaphorical and hermeneutical approach, a phenomenological approach, and it's also study about individual experience. But also, you can use the same, ways or same steps of the data analysis. We have biographical narrative analysis, and we have case study, mixed methods, and focus groups. So all those methods that we can use. Here we came to the end of today's lecture. I hope you got a clear idea and understanding of how we analyze data in qualitative research method, or how we analyze qualitative data. If you have any question, please you email me or you can write it down on the comments. So I try my best to answer it as much as fast as I can. And I hope that you enjoy the lecture class. Thank you very much. I see you in the next lecture class. Thanks.